Well, great. I know we have more people joining, but we'll begin. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this special Lunch with the Friends program. Monday, October 11th was Indigenous Peoples Day, and we're very excited today and grateful to have two Indigenous leaders in the Minnesota legislature join us. We have State Senator Mary Kunish and State Representative Heather Keeler. And we're going to discuss Indigenous Peoples Day and the importance of clean water in that context of Indigenous Peoples Day. I'm Chris Knopp, the Executive Director of Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness. For over 40 years, Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness has been the leader in protecting the clean water of the boundary waters and the broader Quetico Superior ecosystem. And we've been that leader because of you. All of you out there are the strength of our organization. We're a people-based organization, and we recognize that you are the strength of what we are as an organization and what we do every day to protect clean water. Today, our work focuses on three areas: wilderness, people, and community. For the wilderness, there are two mines that threaten the clean water of the boundary waters and the Quetico Superior ecosystem. Those are twin metals and polymet, and that one threat is the sulfuric acid that would come from these mines and poison our water. For people, through our No Boundaries to the Boundary Waters program, we connect students of all backgrounds all across Minnesota to the boundary waters through classroom education, online programs, local paddle days, and scholarships for wilderness canoe trips into the wilderness. And then finally, for community, we recognize that in order for the wilderness to be truly protected, that the communities that are gateways to the boundary waters, Ely, Grand Marais, the Gunflint Trail, and North Shore, must prosper and thrive. So we support policies that make those communities stronger and resilient and less dependent upon extractive resources such as sulfide mining here. So 2 days ago, Monday, October 11th, was Indigenous Peoples Day, and President Biden issued a proclamation recognizing October 11th as Indigenous Peoples Day. So we have a real opportunity here to reflect on the importance of clean water with Senator Mary Kunish of New Brighton and State Representative Heather Keeler of Moorhead. Senator Kunish is from Standing Rock Sioux ancestry, and Heather Keeler is a enrolled member of the Yankton Sioux tribe. And so this importance of the Indigenous perspective on our work is for the boundary waters especially important, since we are in the ceded territories under the 1854 treaty, and we recognize that there's a history that long predates European settlement of Minnesota that we need to recognize, respect, and incorporate into our work here. So I'm going to kick off this conversation here with a question for both Senator Kunish and Representative Keeler, and I'll have Senator Kunish go first. Why don't you speak a little bit more about your background and why you ran for the Minnesota legislature and your work that you're doing on clean water issues for all of us. So thank you. Please go ahead.
Mitaki Yape. I am, State Senator Mary Kunish. I represent District 41, which includes the communities of St. Anthony Village and New Brighton, Columbia Heights and Hilltop, Fridley, and a little bit of Spring Lake Park. I just completed my first year in the Senate, having served 4 years in the Minnesota House in representing District 41B. I also retired just almost a year ago from full-time teaching. I had been a library media specialist for close to 25 years. And so, you know, it was kind of bittersweet this fall not to be returning back to school and getting my library in order and connecting with the staff and the kids. But it certainly has allowed more opportunity for me to participate in activities like this. I was born in St. Paul, raised in Sartell, where right where the Mississippi and the Watab Creek meet. And so, you know, growing up in rural Minnesota like that, it was actually just a little village when I was growing up. Nothing like it is now. We had the run of the land, you know, the farmland, the creek and the river and the woods that we played in. And those sort of opportunities certainly are what, kind of is the core of my work when I'm trying to preserve our environment, not just where I represent, but across this beautiful state of Minnesota. And so those are the kind of things that I have been working on. I have worked and supported a lot of work for different environmental issues, but also for our Native American communities. In 2019, I was able to pass the very unique and comprehensive Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Task Force. And we completed that within 2 years, 18 months actually, and shared that report this past December with the state legislature. And then partnering up with Representative Keeler, we proposed continuing legislation to create a permanent Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives Office in our state government. And lo and behold, we were successful, and we are the first in the nation. We were the first in the nation to create the comprehensive task force that we did. We were first in the nation to create a permanent, full-funded Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives Office. And then understanding the complexity and the intersectionality of other communities of color, we also, along with Representative Ruth Richardson in the House, passed the first in the nation Missing and Murdered African American task force. And I don't think I have to tell this audience how environmental issues have had negative effects on our communities of color. And so with those sort of things in my world and the connections that I have made, I am absolutely proud to be able to support the legislation like Prove It First, and also to be a friend of the Boundary Waters and all of you. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Senator Kunish. And Representative Keeler, if you provide some more about your background as well.
Sure, thanks for having me here today. My name is Heather Keeler. I'm an enrolled member of the Hunktawan Nation, which is the Yankton Sioux tribe down in South Dakota with lineage to Eastern Shoshone. As a lot of you may know, we can have 2 bloodlines, but we're only eligible for enrollment in 1. So I feel like I always have to mention the Eastern Shoshone side of me because that's my mom's side, and that makes up the entire person of who I am. So that's me. I serve and represent District 4A, which actually sits on the Treaty of Traverse of 1851, which the really cool part about that to me, and why I thought it was important for me to step up and serve in this capacity is because growing up as an Indigenous woman and as an Indigenous girl living off the reservation, I didn't see people who looked like me. I tell this story a lot, like I didn't see teachers who looked like me. Anywhere I went, to the doctor, to the bank, to the grocery store, like I just didn't see people who looked like me. And subliminally, that tells us that we don't belong in those spaces. But not only that, as intentionally harmful to people who look like me in my communities. And so we felt that, we saw that, we knew that. It's really interesting because I didn't vote until my mid-20s because nobody really talked to me about getting involved. My messaging to me all through K-12 was because you're Indian, you're going to be dumb at math, you're not going to go to college, just go work at a casino, all of these things. And so subliminally, it just always told me I wasn't really going to belong. And then as I started working in Indian education and sitting in living rooms and really listening to families, I knew that the things that me and my family grew up struggling with were something that a lot of people were dealing with. And we just wanted to be heard, and we wanted to be seen and valued and appreciated. And we wanted to feel like we actually belonged in our communities. And so in 2019, I don't take no very well for an answer. We asked to put Indigenous Peoples Day on the calendar for our school district. And they said, no, we're not going to do that. Like, we'll only do that if the city recognizes it. So I figured out how to get on the Human Rights Commission. And in my first meeting, and Senator Kunesh knows me well enough that like it doesn't take me very many meetings to get comfortable to say like, why aren't we doing this? So my first meeting, I said, I think we need to present this to City Council, and we ended up passing Indigenous Peoples Day. And in that, I brought about 100 people with me to City Hall. And it wasn't because I wanted it to make us against them. Like often when Indigenous people show up to represent something that we care about, it's met with a lot of force because it's this us against them mentality. But I brought a lot of our community to that event because I wanted people to see what change looked and felt like when we did it collectively as a community. And that was kind of my first, like, even step into any type of community leadership. I've always been just a grassroots effort type of a girl. So when I was in grad school, I did talking circles in my community about the barriers in education and learned that representation matters and people need to see people who look like us. And that was the same thing that I felt. And so when Ben Lean announced his retirement, I just decided my community deserves options. They didn't have to vote for me, but I at least felt like my community deserved a choice and an option of one, a female, but also a minority. And so I went and through the endorsement process, the primary and the general, and I just got done serving my first session in the Minnesota House.
Great, thanks for outlining your journey there, Representative Keeler. So President Biden issued a proclamation recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day, and so Senator Kunish, what does that mean when the president issued that proclamation from the nation's highest office in the land? What did that mean to you?
Well, it certainly means that nationally we are starting to recognize the historic trauma and genocide that our American Indian people have suffered these hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's raising, it helps to raise the consciousness of today's struggles for our tribal members, our community members, and those across the nation. But it really, what it also does is that with that acknowledgement, it shows that we, the president and the federal government is now starting to acknowledge their role in what has been terrible disparities for our American Indian communities. And it's going to allow for groundwork so that we can continue to do the work that maybe we've begun here in Minnesota for our Native folks and organize those efforts between our state and federal level and center those resources that have been withheld for so long to the needs of our Native community. And I think having Native women or Native people, because there's plenty of men that are serving in the Biden administration as well as other levels, but having somebody like the Secretary of the Interior there to advocate and give that perspective, share the lens of the Indigenous people across the nation to some of the head decision makers in our country, those that make policy, that change policy. And so in a way, I feel like his announcement certainly, made us all very proud and recognizes that we have a voice in the decision making because we're starting to rise up more and more. We're winning more and more battles when it comes to policy and finances. And hopefully we will see the brutalization of our Indigenous people through lack of policy and investment, but also violence against our Native communities, the poor infrastructure on reservations and that sort of thing. So I think it just really makes me proud and happy that he did that. It's unfortunate that it's taken till what, 2021 for a president to acknowledge that, but it's a start, and it's a win for us. And I hope to see more and more come out of the Biden administration when it comes to positive change and reformation for our Indigenous communities.
Thank you, Senator Kunish and Representative Keeler. So you battled at the local level trying to get Indigenous Peoples Day recognized, and now President Biden has issued his proclamation. What did it mean for the president to recognize Indigenous Peoples Day for you?
I think first it's important to understand kind of what a proclamation is. It's like a statement of support, or it's a statement of celebration. It's this. I think we found out about it days before Indigenous Peoples Day. We've done them, here in Minnesota with our governor as well. And I do think that it's a good first step. I agree with everything that Senator Kunish said. We have a long ways to go. It's really interesting, right? That like we can make a statement, that a proclamation that we care about Indigenous Peoples Day, yet there's a lot of concerns that we've been trying to get attention on because it's impacting our communities, and they fall on deaf ears. So, we can't be that contradicting, and we can't say that Indigenous Peoples Day is about understanding and really engaging and implementing a change in your community, in your region, in your nation. And I just think that lip service is one thing, and you're right, we're moving in the right direction because we're acknowledging it and we're calling it out, but this comes with a lot of actions. And so what I hope it does, is it's the line in the sand that we're going to start to move forward. And one of the things here at the local level, because that's what we do in our seats. I think it's easy for us as state legislators to think like on a national level, how could we get involved? We really tried to do that with Line 3. But at the end of the day, our voters put us in these seats in the state. And so we're actually in the process of developing a bill here in Minnesota that will make Indigenous Peoples Day a traditionally recognized holiday in the state. I'll carry it in the House. And Senator Kunish obviously has agreed to carry it in the Senate. And we'll do this work together because I think it's important, especially in Minnesota, that we really lead the way and have our own statutes and, by law this day for moving forward. Because proclamations, if a new governor or president come in, then it's like they don't do it that year and it's not a big deal. It's an option. And we want to make this something more permanent.
That's an excellent point, that you would needing to move from words to action, and that there's a real limit to words, and what Senator Kunesh said about the importance of putting resources behind it, both real personnel, real money behind it, because otherwise they're empty promises and things don't change. We just have empty words out there. Turning to clean water here, and Senator Kunish, you talked a little bit about why clean water is important to you, and when you were growing up, your love of the outdoors there. Would you talk a little bit more about the importance of clean water to you and how it's kind of informed your work in the Minnesota legislature?
Oh, absolutely. So as I mentioned, I grew up in Sartell, just 8 miles north of St. Cloud, where the Mississippi River and the Watab Creek met. And when I was a little girl, we spent our summer playing in the creek, playing in the river, catching crayfish, all sorts of adventures. That's where we learned to swim. And there came the day that my dad said that we could not play in the water anymore. We were surrounded by farms, and the runoff from not only the manure and the fields and the chemicals that were being used back in the 60s and early 70s was affecting the creek. And there were high contents of pollutants in the creek. And then, of course, there was the Mississippi River, and right in Sartell, there was a paper mill. St. Regis paper mill, and a big dam. And there were days that paper mill would just release the most noxious water right into the Mississippi, directly into the Mississippi. And if the dam was open, there would be this foam from the churning water that would just, foam up like 2, 3, 4 stories high when it was yellow. And I mean, it was so obvious that the pollutant was there. There was also a foundry, the Desergs foundry in Sartell, that was spewing, polluted smoke and air into the air. And so while we lived in this very rural area, all around us were these pollutants. And when my dad said that we couldn't, be in the water anymore, it was a really harsh reality. And, thankfully, the U.S. Congress passed the Clean Air Act in 1972, ensuring that we were going to protect and maintain the chemical, the physical, the biological integrity of our nation's water. So this wasn't just a Minnesota thing. And it has made a big difference on our nation's water and our water here in Minnesota. But let's, really be clear that clean water is absolutely vital to our health. It's vital to our communities and to our economy. Part of my district has the Mississippi River running through it, and anything that happens upstream is going to affect my communities down here, all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. So the health of the rivers and the lakes, the streams, our fragile wetlands, those are all vital to the future. And so it's so important that we continue to do what we can to protect that water, for clean water for drinking. Minnesota is, well, their economy is based on tourism, especially up north. So our cherished way of life, going to the cabin, getting out into nature to hike and bike and canoe through the boundary waters, all of those depend on clean water, on a healthy ecosystem, to provide that for not just us, but for wildlife habitat. We've seen across the state different creeks or rivers that have been so polluted that the fish, die away, or frogs are found with more than 4 legs and double heads and those sort of things. So absolutely, our future, our economy depends on the clean water. And if we don't stand up and fight for that alongside with all of you, we will be doomed, and we won't have a clean a world to leave for the next 7 generations of the future children and families.
Thank you, Senator Kunish. You raised such a good point there that water really is the critical resource. People talk about critical minerals and things like that, but certainly this past year, where we've seen droughts across the country, and the importance of clean water, that here clean water is the critical resource, and if we lose that, then we're really sunk here. Representative Keeler, would you talk about the importance of clean water to? Yes, water is life. Thank you, Kirsten, for that. So Heather, would you talk about the importance of clean water in the work that you do?
Sure. I think clean water is connected to a lot of other things. For me, as an Indigenous person, I understand the responsibility and our impact on 7 generations. And just for people to understand, like 7 generations, an average generation is 25 years. For 7 generations, I mean, we're looking at 175 to 200 years worth of impact. And so what we do today, or what we don't do today, impacts almost 200 years worth of our relatives. We are here, understanding and really fighting for treaties and treaty understanding and treaty responsibility, because to us, the foundation of treaties are being good neighbors to each other. Not only good neighbors to each other, like geographically, like, hey, you're my physical neighbor, but being a good neighbor and a good relative to our kids, their kids, their kids' kids, your kids' kids, like all the kids, 7 generation. But also, Unchi Maka is my relative. This is not just like dirt and water and land. Unchi Maka, Grandmother Earth, is my relative. And so often when we get into these spaces and we really fight for, our water and our clean air, and people say, well, y'all are just so emotional, like we need to take the emotions out of it. Like, that's not the way that we look at it. We really fight for the clean water in a way that is fighting for our relatives. And so to me, that's why it's important. I grew up understanding water was one of those elements that the government really fought us for. I grew up along the Missouri River, and in the state of South Dakota, a lot of the dams in the 50s were built on reservations. And reservations were the spaces that they sent all of us because they were identified as unusable land. If you look at most reservations, that's kind of what we ended up getting. And so I remember my grandma telling me about their fight, to stop the Army Corps of Engineers from flooding out these areas to build dams because they were flooding out some of our most sacred burial grounds. And their response was like, well, we'll just move them. We'll just move the burial grounds. And I feel like, my mom was an active part of AIM, and they fought for a lot of social justice and environmental justice rights. And then now it's just my turn to step into that space, to be a voice, in the path of all the generations to protect our water and protect our relatives.
Great, thank you so much, Representative Keeler, to talk about that connectivity and that responsibility that extends beyond the moment to 7 generations. One of the things that, as an organization, we've been proud to work on with both of you is the Prove It First bill, and the Prove It First bill is part of that promise to the 7 generations, and that law, if it passes, would simply require an applicant for one of these sulfide mines to prove that it has been done safely elsewhere in the country for at least 10 years, and that type of mine has been closed for 10 years without causing pollution. And if that demonstration can't be made, then that type of mine can't be built here in Minnesota. That we shouldn't be a guinea pig here. It's a very simple legislation. And Representative Keeler, would you talk about your support for Prove It First and why it's important to you?
Well, kind of what we've been saying and what the theme is that it's our responsibility to be a voice and protect our water and protect our relatives. And I live on the total opposite side of the state, but I do know that this whole entire community and this whole state and region appreciates and loves our water. And the thing that I like most after talking to Senator McEwen about the Prove It First bill was the fact that you're all fighting for this one area of the state, but if we start to allow these types of processes to happen, whether it's pipelines, whether it's mining, whatever it is, if we don't have these safe standards and nets set up now, things are just going to get out of control. And it can be in my community, it can be in your community, it can be in any of our communities. And so that's the one thing that we're really trying to do, is to set up those policy areas that are really setting us up to do the work that some people say we really care about. We can say that we care about clean air, and we can say that we care about it. We talk about being a carbon neutral state quite a bit, but yet there's no policies that even make permits go through an assessment process to see what a carbon impact would be. And so that's the things that I really appreciate about the language, is that we're actually doing research to see how can this be done in a safe way, and then also how can it shut down and stay shut down, because we know that elements live in soil even after buildings are long gone. And so just making sure that we're setting up those safeguards in our state is what I believe my constituents and people across the state are hoping and needing us to do.
Thank you, Representative Keeler. It is true that we're all connected here, and that we're so grateful that as a representative of Moorhead, you're also a representative of the entire state, and take that shared responsibility so seriously here. And Senator Kunish, if you talk about your support for Prove It First as well.
I'm happy to do that, and I'm happy to support this bill. We tout it as such a common sense bill, and it makes perfect sense. that anything that would not only harm the boundary waters, because it's right there on the edge of the boundary waters canoe area, but anything that has the potential, again, to affect our water and our lands, moving south from there, absolutely we should be requiring proof of safety and remediation afterwards, for sure. Again, we are dealing, just like with the Enbridge pipeline, we are dealing with foreign entities, multinational corporations that are here in Minnesota and want to do their business here in Minnesota, far from any of the responsibility or direct consequences of any kind of mishap. And they're asking us, they're telling us, don't worry, we got this, just trust us. We've done this in other places and it hasn't had, negative effect. I think they said they have a zero discharge mine that doesn't pollute the water system, but they aren't able to prove it. And they have to prove it to us in Minnesota. And they don't have to prove it to us in Minnesota for 1 year, 2 years, but they have to prove, in longevity, that there is not a compromise to the lack of pollution within the process that they're doing it. And so, I'm generally an optimistic person. I generally trust people with their words, but if in the last 5 years, one thing I've learned is that we can't do that, especially when it's something as important as our environment and, the very, very, very precious boundary water canoe area and those communities around it. And so if they're not going to offer any proof, if Twin Metals is not going to step up and offer any proof and say, we got it, we're going to do the best that we can, I don't think that's enough. That absolutely is not enough. And so if this is going to be the future, if we are going to allow entities like this to come into Minnesota and operate something as precarious as copper sulfide mining, we have to make sure that there is no question in how it is done and how it is going to allow for the safety and the health of our future environment here in Minnesota. And I think it's a perfectly reasonable not only request but demand. And I think we ought to, certainly codify these kind of things, these kind of protections within our state statutes, so that those that would like to come to Minnesota and do this kind of work realize that we mean business and we're not just Minnesota nice. We're going to take you at your word, because we have seen that is not the case time and time again. And if you especially look at what has been done to the reservations and our Indian folks, the state government, the federal government, all these years have said, not to worry, we will take care of you. We will provide all the things that you need for a good, positive life. And then, the rug just pulled out from underneath them. So I absolutely believe that this Prove It First legislation needs to be passed, and we need to apply it in so many different ways.
Thank you, Senator Kunish. You raised a number of really important points there, that these sort of promises that nothing bad will happen here. It's really that the track record of Glencore that owns Polymet and Antofagasta that owns Twin Metals is just terrible. That these are bad corporate actors that have left a path of destruction and child labor overseas, of destroying communities in their home countries in Chile. It's just these are truly bad actors, and to try to rely on their empty promises is just a dangerous thing to allow these bad actors to come into to Minnesota here. Representative Keeler, I wanted to ask you, what can non-Native people do to support Native perspectives? There's a question that was asked by one of our audience participants here, and what message do you have for non-Native people in working with Native people here?
I think that's a loaded question.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a lot of ways, and it depends on how you want to work on things. To me, the bottom line is always genuine effort and allyship. Allyship is just one thing. To say like I'm an ally, I stand with you. Basically, to me, says you're not going to like stand in my way. You're not going to prevent me from having the rights that I feel like we deserve. We have, but really being mindful and genuine in your action too. Show up in the spaces that are really difficult, engage to learn more. We know that our K-12 setting has failed us dramatically when it comes to understanding the Indigenous culture and the land in which all of you are standing on. So, we can blame a system all we want, but we know that, but there's a lot of opportunities to learn and grow and be in community. The one thing is that I know from talking to non-natives, they feel like powwows or events are like not open to non-natives. And what I can tell you is that we welcome relationships. We're a relational community. And so, to me, it's about building relationships and really finding a niche where there's a need, because we make up 1% of this entire nation. We talked about this when we were talking about murdered and missing Indigenous women years ago, is that even if 100% of the Native American population stands up and screams as loud as we possibly can, we're still really easily swept under the rug because we're only 1%. And so amplifying the voices, being in space and not taking over space, amplifying the leaders and the grassroots organizers. Maybe they don't have all the fancy degrees that some of y'all have, but that doesn't mean that they don't understand the issues. Elevate them, elevate the youth, really engage and talk to the youth that you're involved in your community and help them understand that they have a path to leadership too, that their voice matters. I think those are some of the things that we can get involved in, but then also have grace with us as a community. We're not at the same space as a lot of people are. If we look at the pattern of what, our universities were being built at the exact same time that our kids were being taken to boarding schools. So this whole system is not designed the same for us. And so have a little bit of grace with us as we learn and we find our voices in these spaces, because we're walking in two worlds. We're having to speak up and do things that aren't typical in our culture. And we're having to do it because it's the last thing that we can do to try to protect the people that we really, really care about. So I think that would be the best advice that I can give non-Indigenous people, at least to get involved in some of these efforts that we're working on.
Great, thank you so much for those comments. I have a Representative Keeler follow-up question. This may be a longer answer than we have time for, but you've been very involved in education and the education system. What are the ways in which the education system can best serve Native students?
That is, I could go on and on and on about that, right? One of the things that we were able to do and that we've been able to do is in our higher ed committee and in our higher ed budget is we put money aside for teachers of color and Indigenous teachers scholarships, because we know it's important for teachers to represent the kids that are in their classroom. I also think it's really important that we need to start investing in STEM programs, because I will tell you, and I am sure Senator Kunish, she's nodding her head, that almost every single meeting that we are in, and we're talking to the decision makers at the agency levels, at the state and federal levels that are making decisions about Unchimaka and our relatives, they don't look like us. And so we have to start investing in those pathways again, so that people are sitting at tables that understand all perspectives of life. If it's going to impact all communities, why aren't all communities at the tables? And so I really hope now that that's been kind of brought to my attention and really brought to light in this capacity, that's what I really hope that we can do is start to invest in that pathway through STEM with BIPOC youth leaders and women in general. You know, we talk about STEM and women, but how do we get a more diverse professional population that's making decisions when it's coming to our permits? Because we're seeing it's failing us miserably actually right now.
Thank you so much for that, Representative Keeler. We're through our No Boundaries to the Boundary Waters program that we're really starting to hit stride with this. In the upcoming year, we're going to partner with St. Scholastica to collect Native elder stories and incorporate them into our education program to make it more inclusive. We recognize the limits of what we're doing, and we want to be more inclusive and responsive and more effective in what we're doing here. So there's a lot in the education realm that we as an organization hope to contribute in our small way as well. And Senator Kunish, from your perspective there, you know, what can non-Native people do to be more responsive to Native concerns? And
well, definitely educate yourself, and don't always rely on those that appear to be the experts or are sounding like they are the experts. If there are issues that pique your interest, maybe you read a letter to the editor that's like, I don't know much about this issue. You know, do the best that you can to educate yourself on issues that seem to make a big difference, not only to yourselves, but, you know, to the good of all of the people. Look for the experts, and then really make an effort to do something. You can educate yourself, you can talk about it amongst like-minded friends and neighbors and community members, but talking about it is not enough. You need to take some kind of action. And we can't always tell you exactly what action it might be. It could be writing a letter to the editor. It could be writing a letter, an email, or making a phone call to your legislator. But if we're not there, or we have an assistant that's you know, sifting through our information, we might miss those messages. So find ways to in person talk to those that are making a difference, and not just at the state level, but, you know, look at what you can do locally in your municipality. I served on our Park Rec and Environmental Board before I was elected, and we were able to ensure that we had green spaces and parks for families and kids to play in, that our creeks and our lakes within our community, as well as the river, were well cared for, that our trees were healthy. That's a way to make a difference within your community. At the county level, at the state level, there are ways to be heard. Supporting organizations like Friends of the Boundary Waters and voicing your displeasure with, even to the governor. I mean, making those phone calls to the governor's office. You might not get through, but they do keep track of all of those people that do call, because they want to hear, they really do want to hear what our people, what our community members, what our constituents are thinking on certain issues. There are different organizations that you can support financially to do the work, such as Friends of the Boundary Water, Minnesota 350. I love the education program that you are doing. As a teacher of inner city kids, I was always just sort of blown away by, and I want to say these poor kids, mostly because they're not exposed to the environment that often most children, you know, kids with privilege have. Kids that get to go away to camps every year, who get to have an enhancement coursework classes and programming over the summer. And I remember taking sixth graders to a petting farm as a field trip, and these kids driving through the country, never having seen a real cow. getting to the little farm and seeing sheep and ducks and pigs. I mean, it was life-changing for them in so many ways, and things that we take for granted. And just like Representative Keeler said, ensuring that the programming that we have in our schools includes STEM education. And especially in those inner city schools, or the schools that have fewer resources, find out what you can do to support those schools, whether it's helping with reading skills, math skills, maybe you are an engineer, or have some kind of special skill. There's so many ways that we can make change in a positive way, not always prescribed by somebody else, but by looking around and looking for that need within your community and finding that place to plug your skills into.
Great. Thank you, Senator Kunish. Representative Keeler, you've been through your first session here at the Minnesota Legislature. What are some of the things that inspire you, and what are some of the things that you find perhaps most challenging?
I think the thing that actually inspires me the most is how engaged our youth are. Like, our youth that aren't even voters yet are so invested and engaged in this process. And that fills me with a lot of hope that we're moving in a really powerful direction. Like, I just cannot wait for our next generation to step up to the plate. And so that piece is really humbling. As a little girl, like I mentioned, not seeing people who looked like me, being able to have the next generation say, it's like so cool to see all four of you, doing what you do and having conversations that my grandma said, she never saw had. But this is a really hard job. And I think that often in places we kind of sugarcoat that. But especially in a space that I don't know if many of you have seen the inside of the House chambers, but we sit and serve under a jumbo portrait of President Lincoln. And that the conversations that we have, we're always just defending and fighting to be seen and understood. And so that work comes with a lot of like trauma triggers and historical trauma conversations. But we do it. And we do it as a sisterhood. We have a Native American caucus. We don't meet regularly, but when things get difficult, it's really nice to be able to just reach out to Senator Kunish, Representative Jamie Becker-Finn, and sometimes even Lieutenant Governor Flanagan joins in with us, because this work is hard. The system wasn't designed for us to be here. And quite frankly, it was designed to dispose us. So, we're like fighting a system that doesn't want us here every single day. We saw that when Line 3 water protectors went to the Capitol because they'd been fighting to be heard and have a conversation. And all of a sudden the gates went back up around the Capitol. Like that to me was the clear visual of what our government feels like sometimes. And so the support and the continued efforts of all of you to do this work is also really grounding and humbling, because we know that we're not in it alone. And that makes the hard days much better. I can tell you that.
Thank you, Representative Keeler. I think the upcoming generations inspiring to all of us, that energy and optimism that and engagement that's out there. Representative Keeler, kind of following up on being at the Capitol and seeing those sort of symbols of trauma that are out there. People often say that non-Native people might say that, oh, these treaties give Native people special rights. Can you kind of correct that perspective and talk about the retained rights within treaties and why that perspective is so wrong? So
that again is another jumbo topic. Treaties were designed, we gave up millions of acres of land in exchange for Bureau of Indian Affairs and services like Indian Healthcare Services, Bureau of Indian Education. Those systems dramatically are underfunded. They're always systems and agencies that are on the chopping block when people want to shave down the budget. You know, like we don't really have a whole lot of perks, you know, that in that sense, like people think we all go to school for free. People think we just get per cap all the time. Like that's not, I know I don't. I know some tribes have done economic development really well, and they do have some investment and payout plans that are really beneficial for their members, but that's not really typical. To be an enrolled member, you know, this other side of what I do for life could talk about this for a really long time, but you know, to be even eligible for enrollment to receive these quote unquote benefits is through blood quantum, and the only other living things that utilize blood quantum are horses and dogs for breeding purposes. To me, it's a numerical genocide. It's not a way to document us, you know, to be able to utilize services. At the end of the day, we're a government to government relationship, and those were the agreements. And so it's not like we're just getting things for free. You're standing on the land that we gave up to hopefully receive something back in exchange. And we didn't give them up lightly. It's not, I mean, if you see pictures, our tribal leaders are in tears. You can see the stress on their face as they're doing this, because we were forced to do things to save our families, even if it meant we lived in smaller land plots. So it's a huge misconception to believe that we have a lot of like perks or benefits, other than the fact that we're part of a beautiful, resilient culture that continues to be alive and well and strong and growing. Our census shows that we actually grew, which says we're here. We're not going anywhere.
Great. Thank you so much, Representative Keeler there. And Senator Kunish, you know, we're getting near the end of our program here. Are there some final thoughts that you want to leave our audience with here?
Well, I do appreciate this invitation to join you over your lunch hour and to discuss these issues. Again, as an educator of 25 years, I find that a lot of the work that I do at the state legislature and outside of the legislature is educating folks on issues, especially issues that affect our American Indian communities. And when we talk about preserving our environment, acknowledging the sovereignty and the treaties that we have here in Minnesota, the fact that you all are listening to these today. What do I see? There's 102 people on this Zoom. That's what is it? 98 people that are maybe learned something new, or we confirmed something that you thought about. The issues aren't just around treaty rights or water rights like Line 3 or the mines, but also the human rights of our Native communities. Representative Keeler and I passed that legislation to create the first in the nation missing and murdered Indigenous relatives office, because our Native women, girls, boys, and Two-Spirits have the highest rates of violence of any other group, right there with our Black women and children. And these are issues that we are all responsible for, no matter where we originated from, where we moved from, whatever our socioeconomic status is, how much education we have. We have a responsibility, a moral responsibility for the well-being of every single person in our state. That's what we legislators were elected to do, look out for all of Minnesotans. But that doesn't mean we're the only ones to do it. And so I appreciate so much that you joining us here today, but I would encourage you again to continue to educate yourself around issues, not just for our Native communities, but all of those that have terrible disparities in health services, education, strong, good paying jobs, stable, affordable housing. Those are all things that make a good community, that make a good state. And I hope that those of you on this Zoom will join us in this plight to ensure that all Minnesotans have the opportunity to thrive and have a healthy, happy, and prosperous life as we go forward. So Wopala Tonka and Chi Miigwech for being here today.
Thank you so much, Senator Kunish, and Representative Keeler. Some final words for our audience tonight or today.
Same as what Senator Kunish said. I didn't realize there was 102 people on here until you said that. I was really like, but thank all of you. You know, I mean, I see a lot of things telling us thank you, but really we can't do our work without you all. You share information with us that's so important for us to make knowledgeable and informed decisions, and that matters. You know, we get pulled in a lot of directions, and being a grassroots organizer for so long before being a politician, we need to do better at building that bridge and really working together, because I am not on the grassroots level like I was, and it's amazing how much you get out of touch with some of those things. And so, you know, some of the most trusted conversations that I have are with my leaders, you know, who are out in these areas and really working on these issues. So your work is so important and your work is so vital, and we just appreciate all of the support that you provide. You know, there's things that you can do on the ground. You can make phone calls, you can write letters, you can send postcards from your home. Like, and we've seen you do that from all capacities in the last, I don't know, feels like 2 years now with COVID. And I think COVID has provided a lane for these bigger systems to really just rip through Mother Earth, because we're not able to show up in the capacity in person that we used to, because we care and love each other and we want each other to be safe and healthy through COVID. And so I know it's been really a hard couple years, and we see you and we know that this is really hard work. We do this and we're all here because we're really passionate about this work. And when we're passionate, pain comes with that. But growing pains hurt, but we grow in the right direction as long as we're all growing together. And so I know that I speak for myself and Senator Kunish that we do not want to do this work alone. We want to do this work with you and for you, and not just alone. So Pilam, thank you for everything.
Thank you, Representative Keeler. Thank you, Senator Kunish, and your words about the importance of working with community and working with people is so important. And we're so grateful for your leadership on this. On the topic of community, this Saturday, October 16th at 6 o'clock, we have our virtual annual gathering. We decided we couldn't safely meet in person as a group, and everyone can go to our website and register for free. It will have about an hour-long program where we'll try to create community as we can, best we can over Zoom here. But it will be a part of recognizing that it's people power, and that together we're stronger and can make a better future. And so if for all of you that are watching today, I hope that you'll join us on Saturday for that program, and that invitation to register for free is extended to Representative Keeler and Senator Kunish. It would be great to have you part of that as well. So again, thank you to everyone watching, but also especially thank you, Representative Keeler. Thank you, Senator Kunish. We're very grateful. So Chimegwich, Pumaya Yay, and thank you again. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye now, everybody. Take care.
Bye, see you.